as we do every Thursday at this time. And today I'm welcoming somebody whom I have gotten to know for almost a year now, on and off, and I love the work that she does. So Julia, can you unmute and show your face to the rest of the audience? And eeny, miny, there she is. See. Yeah. You got the green, you got the blue, you got it all going on. Awesome. So Julia Felton is actually in the UK, which is beautiful because her and I, we don't have a lot of time difference. It's easier to manage this type of thing. And I actually met her in a mastermind we were both in. And what impressed me most about Julia is not just the way that she is calm, gets organized, but also she includes one of my favorite animals in what she does. Horses, horsepower, horse business power. So there's all the power. And Julia, tell everybody a little bit about what exactly you do and how you got there.
Okay, well, thanks, Natalie. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. It's such an important topic about choosing happiness. And I know we're going to delve into that in a moment. But what do I do? So I'm a leadership and team engagement specialist. So I work with business owners and business leaders to really help them get back control of their business and take their business to the next level. Because I'm sure many people listening today can recognize that some of us have set up businesses because it seemed like a good idea at the time. And now we've become a slave to our business, right? Our business is even worse than the boss that maybe we work for in corporate. So because we're our own boss and we're not very nice to ourselves. So I work with business owners to help them scale their business, particularly by helping them leverage their time, their team, and their talent so that they can make their business more effective, really design the business they want that makes them happy, rather than building a business, which I see so many people do, that they think they should build. And as you said, part of that in terms of developing leadership skills, I include some experiential sessions in there. So I love people coming out to be with the horses, to master what it is to really lead effectively. Because, you know, let's face it, the horse doesn't sugarcoat the feedback. He just says it how it is. And your team members, or, you know, if you're a solopreneur, the freelancers you're working with, they might not be telling you when you're not a great leader for them, but the horse is ruthless in the feedback. So it's very inspiring. And I think what I love about it most is that, you know, let's face it, we're all looking for a quick fix. And we know there's no such thing really as a quick fix. But what I do notice is when people come out and be with the horses, because they actually experience and embody leadership in that moment, they can remember, oh yeah, when I did this, I got that result. But when I did this, I got a different result. So we notice people totally changing their behaviors, and people go away and their business can just transform overnight just because of what they've learned through the horses. So super powerful, and delighted now the horses get back to work now that we're hopefully out of all the pandemic and everything else. I don't think we're ever out of it, but at least people are now more open to coming out. So the horses are excited to be back in work again now.
Wow, you mentioned so many things. Let me talk about business first, because, you know, at least half of our audience here at Women is entrepreneurs, women with a vision, with an idea. And somebody said, why don't you, oh, it looks so easy, you know, and then we have to deal with ourselves as bosses. It's not easy. It's not easy. And then you mentioned team. So if you're a solopreneur and you're in the early stages of the business, which can take anywhere from 5 to 15 years, right?
Yeah.
How do you lead, in your opinion, at that point, and how can you have a team at that point?
So I think the biggest mistake, and I made this when I set up my business, was I was like, hurrah, because I came from the corporate space. I said, no team members to manage, happy days. And what I quite rapidly realized was it's so important for us to have people around us. And I think when we think of the word team member, of course, nowadays that doesn't have to be somebody directly on your payroll. That could be a freelancer, that could be a mentor, that could be a coach. So there's so many different ways that we can be part of a team and a community. And yeah, so I was so excited. I didn't have any team members to manage, but actually what I realized was I need that energy from other people around me to get me motivated in my business. And, there's so much research that we talk about, success is a team sport. Together, everyone achieves more. And I think sometimes when we set up in business, we kind of feel like we have to do everything. There's a little bit of a badge of honor, let me do everything. I was great in the corporate world. If you've come from there or whatever you've come from, I can surely do this. But actually, what we do know to be true is that we've all got our own unique strengths, the things that make us really happy, that we do really well. And actually, life is too short to spend all your time doing the things you don't love. Like in my case, my accounts and my bookkeeping, not a big fan of that. So get people along to help you and support you on the journey to do the things that you. That said, obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, it's your business. You need to have a duty of care to understand enough about what your accounts say and do. But that's very different from physically having to do it, and it would be irresponsible of us to just stick our head in the sand and say, my bookkeeper takes care of that. I don't like accounts, I don't do it. But of course, then that's when you hear all these horror stories of entrepreneurs that have got fleeced out of so much money because they've had somebody be dishonest with them and stuff like that. So, as an entrepreneur, we've got to have a vision and see over all the areas, but that doesn't mean we have to do it. And we know the world is an interdependent place, right? And if anything, the last couple of years have shown us that. We're all impacting everybody around us. And this is what I love about nature. Nature is just such a blueprint of the interdependence right in front of us. And we can't be successful in business unless we work with other people to get there. So that's what I'd say when you're starting out is don't start with the mindset you have to do it all yourself, but look to who can you partner with. And it doesn't have to involve cash, because let's face it, when we're starting out, we're a bit bootstrapping, right?
Just a bit.
So, who could you trade with? Perhaps you offer a service, maybe you're a copywriter. Who could you trade some copywriting with to do something for them? There's lots of ways. And of course, you and I met through a mastermind, and, we do that. We support each other. And that's part of a community of people that you can have around you to support you on the journey.
So then, if I hear you right, in addition to, I'm still with you with the accounting. So that it does not add to my happiness at all. But a team then is not just the people that help you with the daily tasks, but a team, in your opinion, is your spouse, your child, the dog, your coach, the mom, all of those, right?
Yeah. And of course, the challenge is our family team are sometimes the most challenging, because they're the ones that I think they often don't mean to, but bless him, my dad is a classic example of this. Oh, I don't know, you should get a proper job, go back to corporate, and his well-being, but actually it's quite debilitating. So we do have a challenge with a lot of our family who mean the best for us, but sometimes don't show it.
Well, they want to keep us safe, right? That's the they want to keep us safe and just make sure everything's okay. Yeah. Oh, challenges. Now, you mentioned a couple of times also that you come from corporate. So you were in corporate, and then you moved into this fun place of, hey, let's be an entrepreneur. In corporate, you must have left because you were, in my words, not happy. So I would imagine that your idea of happiness may have changed from when you were in school and said, oh, I'm going to get a corporate job. Then you were climbing the ladder in corporate. And then at some point you said, no. So what happened to you and happiness?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, because the reason I left corporate was I had been recruited into the company I was working. I worked with Arthur Andersen, and then I worked with Deloitte. To set up a whole business division for them. So I set that up. I took it from an idea on a piece of paper to the global market leader for them. And then I sold it for them and found myself without a job.
Oh, see?
Whoops, that didn't quite work. So I think it's kind of interesting. I wasn't one of those people that hated my corporate job. Actually, I really loved it. But what had happened, I guess, in kind of the 2 years prior to that was I had become pretty much burnt out by my corporate job. In some ways, I loved it too much. And what I know now, of course, hindsight's always that great thing, like Steve Jobs says, you join the dots looking back, was what I now know about myself that I didn't know then is I love starting stuff. I'm a great, startup type entrepreneur at the beginning, getting stuff done. So setting up that new business division within corporate, where I was pretty much an intrapreneur. So, I had pretty much had my own division, and I had the joy of having that support and that team of the corporate space, but I could pretty much do my own thing. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. And what happened was, as the business got more mature, I didn't like leading it anymore, but I was still doing it because I didn't realize that you need a different type of leader at a different stage when your business is. So what I was doing was then going, well, this is a bit boring. How can we take the concept we've got, which was in the hotel industry, and what would now be called data analytics in the hotel industry? How can I take that into other industries? So then I launched it into health clubs, and I was looking at other vertical industries I could put it into. And I'm doing all that while still trying to manage the business, because that was my zone of genius. And that's what made me happy, was creating the startup and doing all the new stuff. And the kind of maintenance of a more established business wasn't what I loved. So that's how I got to burnout, kind of my own fault, because I didn't understand enough about me and what I love to do. And we had a situation where Arthur Andersen, for some people may or may not know, it used to be the world's largest accountancy firm. It got embroiled in a scandal known as the Enron scandal, which resulted in the company getting closed down. We lost our license to be accountants. Now, in true fashion, we were actually vindicated, but it was a number of years after the event. By that time, the whole business had imploded because all our clients had left. They couldn't trust us, or they thought they couldn't trust us, so everyone left. And it was during that, actually, I had gone on a ranching holiday with my friend to Wyoming. And in order to prepare for the ranching holiday, I needed some equipment because we're going to Wyoming in October to bring the cattle off the hill down. And I'd gone to an equestrian shop and met a girl there and said, I haven't ridden in like 7 years. And now I'm going to a ranch to ride for like 10 hours a day. Help. And she invited me to start riding one of her horses. So I went and rode her horse. And then one day, about sort of 6 or 7 months later, we were out riding. I was like, I'm really jealous. You get to muck out your horse every day and have time with your horse. And she's like, well, you can have a horse. Why don't you get your own horse? And it was at the time we were going through this whole Enron scandal. And I realized a corporate company wasn't going to look after me anymore, which was kind of my conditioning and beliefs I'd had from a kid, from my parents. So yeah, I bought my first horse from her, and I still have him today, 20 years later. So I'd kind of gone through that near burnout, even though I loved the job. And then got my horse. Yeah. So in my mid-30s, I got my first horse. So yeah. So, and obviously then when I left corporate, in corporate, my measures of success and happiness, spoiler alert, were Louis Vuitton handbags, Mulberry handbags, nice things, right? And what I realized after I left corporate was I didn't really like those things. I had these Louis Vuitton handbags and I don't even like them. And my definition of happiness back then was buying things that I thought other people would think good of me about, if that makes sense. So I was living a lot of my life because that's what I thought I was expected to do. And after I'd left the corporate world and then end up setting up my own business, I didn't have copious amounts of money to invest in Mulberry and Louis Vuitton handbags anymore. And what I realized what made me happy was spending time with my horses, spending time out in nature. And I became very clear I didn't want to do that commute to London. My commute to London had been 1 hour and 45 minutes each way. So, I was spending nearly 4 hours a day commuting just to go to London. And, I realized I didn't want to do that. So yeah, so when the redundancy package came, then I used that to set up my own business, and then kind of changed the way I was living. And now I live a much simpler life. I actually live out with my horses, you know, on a farm with my horses. And yeah, my measure of happiness has completely changed.
Love that. Thank you for sharing, especially the Louis Vuitton, because there are so many people. I can relate, because there are so many people who, you know, walk around and then others go, oh, that's so pretty. And I'm like, oh my God, that's so ugly. You know, and it's not about Louis Vuitton, but it's about others too. It's like the latest thing. And I'm like, I'm not going to spend $80 on that. No, you know, but it is, you know, on the same coin, you know, for a while I attended a lot of galas. So of course I needed to have gala clothes. You know, you do that. And now look at them like, I don't need those, you know. So that is interesting. And nature and horses, I think I bring them up quite often in this show and in everything that I do, because I remember, and I think I did a show on what kind of pet do you want to have. Don't go by what somebody else tells you. You know, and horses are some kind of pet. I would, you know, I'll put that out there.
Yeah.
They're just bigger. You can't push them around. So one of the things that I noticed at one point when I was pretty stressed in my life is I caught myself yelling at a cat, you know, at my cat. And she was just happy to see me. I was like, oh, what did I just do? With a horse, of course, that's different. But did you have a moment like that too, where you realized I'm burned out? Was there anything where you said, whoa, it's done? Or was it really that progression of, well, let's go to Wyoming. Oh, I love horses.
It was kind of a combination of things, if I'm honest, Natalie. And I didn't realize at the time I was burnt out. I think that's true to say. But because I now realize I was more of this entrepreneur startup, but I'm still trying to run the team. The company had got me a coach because I wasn't doing quite as well as they thought I should be doing, because I'd been this golden girl and, you know, done so well and set this business division up and it was doing amazingly. And now, for whatever reason, you know, which I now understand because that's not my zone of genius, they were like, well, we get you a coach. And as a result of having a coach for a year, I kind of reevaluated some of the things I wanted to do. And I got really clear, actually, that I wanted to take a time off. And I was really fortunate because the company offered sabbaticals. So I called in a year-long sabbatical from them. And actually, that's when a lot of the transition happened, because I spent the first 6 months out in Colorado at a horse rescue, working with rescued horses. And then I went to Africa and spent time out in the African bush. And I think it probably the pivotal moment was one of those, probably the first or second day when I was out in Colorado. I'm at the horse rescue. I've traveled out there. I've lost my mobile phone on the way there. I've never done that since. I'd never done it before. And that was like my kind of link to the past corporate world. So I find myself in Colorado with no phone, no contacts. And I pretty much had a meltdown that first week, because what I had realized up to that point was my identity and my happiness was tied into my job and my position. And all of a sudden, stripped of that on a sabbatical, I had to start discovering who Julia was. And that was a tough journey. That was a really tough journey. So I think it was kind of during that time, I started learning more about myself and what was important to me. And when I had gone down I spent some time out, as I said, in Africa. And while I was there, somebody said to me, who's been swimming with dolphins? And, you know, at the time I had this big, long bucket list. Maybe you did. I was fortunate in my corporate role. I traveled all around the world, speaking at conferences about the hotel industry. And I was pretty prominent. And so I had this list of things I'd done. And I was like, yeah, I've swum with dolphins. And somebody said, what was the experience like? And I thought about it. And I was like, I have no idea. Ooh. And that was the kind of moment I realized I was going through life, ticking off my bucket list, but not experiencing and not living now in the moment, in the present. I was always like, what's the next project I've got to do? Or this is all the challenges I've had in the office. And yeah, I was like, wow, that's a big wake up call when you don't remember something like, you know, this is a dream for so many people. You've been fortunate enough, Julia, to do it, and you don't really remember any of it. So because I'm a little bit, you know, a bit like you, a bit of a game changer, rebel, throwing things out, throwing the rule book out. I went and trained to be a safari guide. So I went to live in
I want to go on a safari, so you can be my guide.
So I went and lived in the bush for 4 months because I'm like, if I need to get present, if I go and live in the bush, you have to live in the present when you're out in nature in the bush, because that mountain lion or, you know, that elephant, somebody's going to knock you over. You know, you're not going to be around, and it's not just getting knocked over. It's like later. So I spent time out in Africa, and I think that's where I got a lot more present, a lot more grounded, and a lot more connected to what I really wanted, and realized that my happiness came in the moment, you know, being out in nature at those points in time. And of course, that's what the horses had always shown me up to that point, but I just hadn't understood it back then.
Wow. So the wake-up call then allowed you to choose you, and your corporate job really also allowed you the time to choose you. And then you could say, okay, now it's done. And now you got the pleasure of being out in nature, working with horses, having fun with horses, and sharing that experience with others. So if we're thinking now, not about corporate, because we're like, I love this conversation, but I'm also looking at the time. If we're thinking about a solopreneur, not sure how to lead themselves, how to lead their team, whatever that team is, your business, the business horsepower, how can you help them in particular, with horses, without horses, whatever you think would work best?
So I think I work with a combination, you know, of course, I'd love to spend all the time out with the horses, but that's not feasible for everyone to get to where I'm based here in the UK, even though I can work abroad and have many times with horses. I think the first place for people to start is with their purpose. What do they really want to do? And are they really building the business that they want to build? Because I think, and I realize this, and a lot of my clients, it's where I always start with my clients around purpose. What do you really want to do? What's the difference you want to make in the world? And what's the vehicle you want to deliver that through? Because there's so many different ways we can deliver that. But having that level of clarity means that you don't go out and start building a business because you think you should do it. And you think it should be an online business where actually you hate being online and you want it to be an in-person business. Or, you know, you think that, you know, when I first started out on my kind of personal development journey, kind of 10, 11 years ago, you know, everyone's like, oh, you need to get into property, and you need to be in property developing, and you need to be in crypto and, you know, FX trading, and all of these things, which are potentially for the right people could be very good passive income streams. But if it doesn't resonate with you, don't do it. I mean, I ventured into, I'm sure many other people have, network marketing. Just wasn't my gig, but everyone said, oh yes, you really should do network marketing and stuff like that. I learned a lot in the network marketing arena, don't get me wrong, but it just wasn't where my passion lay. So I think it's always about coming back to what do you really want to do? What are you passionate about? You know, importantly, what's going to get you out of bed in the morning? And what's that big vision you're striving to achieve? Because mine right now is having my retreat center so people can come. We spend time with the horses. The horses teach them about leadership, teamwork, how to accelerate the growth of your business. And also then we rescue some other horses and rehabilitate them, because 3 of my 4 horses are all rescue horses. So I like the idea of a little circular economy that I'm going to create. And that's what gets me out of bed every morning, is how I can do that. And how can I serve people to become the best version of themselves, create and design the business they want that really brings them happiness, like I said, rather than designing a business that, you know, on paper looks like a great idea, but doesn't fill them with any joy.
So last question here, because we've talked before we went on the show, you know, I believe in not just working with horses, but with animals, you know, dolphins for therapy, cats, pets, whatever. So I know people who are afraid of horses.
Yep.
And I know from my experience, that can change. But let's just hypothetically say you have an entrepreneur willing to come out, but deathly afraid of horses. How can what is I know what my take on that situation would be, but how would you bring that together?
So that is probably the most common challenge that I deal with. So let me just share what happened. I had a client just last month, came as part of a team, and the gentleman had been kicked by a horse when he was a kid. So understandably, it wasn't like he just perceived they were scary. He physically had, and actually he'd been quite badly injured. So he was very, very scared. I think in that particular situation, it's up to me as a facilitator to make that transition really easy. So, we always talk about the comfort zone, right? And we need to get out of our comfort zone if we're going to grow and expand. So there were a number of ways we could approach that. If I had just put him in an arena with the horses running around in a field, I would have terrorized him, right? That wouldn't work. So it's like, how do we get him to even just be a few feet away from the horses and just gradually build it up? Because for me, the whole experience of coming to the horses is just such a metaphor for leading through uncertainty and change, which is what we're all experiencing right now. And I would just throw up to anyone who's concerned and doesn't even want to give it a go, where else in your life are you missing opportunities just because you've got some degree of fear? And like I said, I'm not suggesting that we jump straight in, and I didn't put that guy in a field straight away with loads of horses galloping around to terrorize him, but gradually get people used to the environment. And what I often find, and this is the funny thing, Natalie, is the people that have the most anxiety about coming are the ones I can never get rid of at the end of the day because they've achieved so much in overcoming those personal obstacles, and they're just like, oh my God, this is okay. So I totally get where people come from, and I would just throw up where else are you feeling challenged and not stepping out of your comfort zone to try something, but you clearly need to do that in a supportive environment to get the result. Otherwise, if you go to the terror zone, you put me at the top of Niagara Falls on a bungee jump and told me to do it, I would just shut down. That is my idea of complete terror and hell, so
We're not choosing that. That is awesome. And that's why you have the team, and why the horses can sense what is going on with the person, and the right horse will show up. So we got about 30 seconds left. And I just want to point out, your website is businesshorsepower.com, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody wants to get in touch with Julia, you've now gotten to know her a little bit because she's been so willing to share, her experiences, her comfort zone, and losing her phone. Which is really, we are so addicted to those things nowadays. I highly recommend that you reach out to her, whether it's about purpose or especially the startup phase of your business. It's just one of those things where, I always talk about long distance runner and short distance runner. It is like, once you're in the zone, it's okay. So reach out to Julia, and our show shall be back next week. Julia, 10 seconds. Any last words for the show?
Well, let's say thank you so much. And everyone, choose happiness in your life. It's way too short. Please do not stay doing things you don't love, because life is finite. If that's anything we've learned in the last few years, it's that.
That was very upbeat. Thank you. Life is finite. But it is true. It is finite. So live your life now. Find Julia for more. Tune back in next week. Next week, I believe I also have a guest. So tune back in for that. And then remember, twice a month, the show will be in German as well. So I'll see you all next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.